Tera is the MMORPG that single-handedly shaped our entire channel. This is the MMO that brought Mrs Stix and I together. I had initially did my very first Tera video probably about 4 years ago. Mrs Stix was playing Tera at the time. She was a new player. She was looking for instruction on how to clear a specific dungeon that I'd done. So she happened upon my Tera video. She watched the video. She then sent me a DM claiming that she and her friends who were playing at the time managed to clear the dungeon. Fast forward a few years and here we are, married, and here I am jumping back into Tera once again. This game has always had a place in my heart purely because it brought me Mrs Stix and Mrs Stix me. So when NMAS Entertainment, who published Tera in North America, announced that they were closing down and that Tera was essentially going to be without a publisher for however long it was going to be without a publisher for, I was kind of upset because I figured it might go to a terrible publisher who is going to milk it even more than NMAS did. Now, Gameforge ended up getting rights to publish this game in North America. They published the game in Europe. So I figured in the grand scheme of things, it ended up okay. So here I am taking a look at Gameforge's version of Tera. This game actually has some differences to the North American version of Tera that both Mrs Stix and I played, but I'll get into that in a minute. First and foremost, let's go ahead here and talk about the classes and the races. The classes consist of the Warrior, the Lancer, the Slayer, the Berserker, the Sorcerer, the Archer, the Priest, the Mystic, the Reaper, which is exclusive to the Ellen race, the Gunner, the Ninja, which again is exclusive to the Ellen race, the Valkyrie. Then the races consist of Human, Castanic, Amon, I'm gonna assume it's Amon, High Elf, Papori, Ellen, and finally the Baraka. Now, there are specific races that have access to specific classes, like the Valkyrie, which can be the Ellen or the Castanic, the Gunner, which is restricted to the Human and the Ellen, and then of course the Ninja and the Reaper, which are both exclusive to the Ellen itself. That's one of the reasons that a lot of people dislike Tera, because A, the Ellen get literally everything, and B, there is a lot of restriction over what you can play and how you can play it. Now, I went Brawler because that is a class that I have never played. Initially, when I played, all the way back when this game was pay to play, I played as a Warrior. And then after it went free to play, I ended up playing Gunner, and I mained Gunner ever since. So this was my first attempt at the Brawler. And you know what? Admittedly, it was kind of fun. I didn't really understand necessarily the intricacies that came along with guarding and damaging at the same time, and how your damage was essentially a guard and having to attempt to time everything perfectly. I'm sure with a lot of time and a lot of dedication that would have been possible to learn, but I mean this is me we're talking about. So I went ahead here, I chose a Brawler, I went with the Human because, I mean, with the exception of the Castanic, I feel like the races aren't really all that appealing. So if given the opportunity of Human and Ellen, naturally I would go Human. So upon getting into the game, I forgot actually how limiting the character creator was in Tera. Back when this initially became available to everyone, I think it was back in 2012, the character creator, when compared to games like Perfect World or Ion, was still limiting, but I remember there weren't games like Black Desert and Blade and Soul out at the time, so this was kind of almost at the pinnacle of customization. But when you go back and look at it now, I was going through the options, noticed that the sliders didn't really offer much in the way of customization. I couldn't really construct my character's face how I wanted to. This character ended up kind of resembling the characters that I had made in the past that happened to be human. They didn't really allow for you to do anything with them. There were some hairstyles, or if you're the Castanic, there are some different horn styles. You can move your face structure around a little bit, and that's pretty much it. After logging into the game, I recalled how much I hated the beginning of Tera because this game has one of the most drawn out tutorials that I have ever seen. But interestingly enough, where NCSoft's North American version of this newbie zone took probably around 45 minutes to an hour to finish, The European version, Gameforge's version in specific, took maybe 5. I just talked to the little girl. I ran up to the village. The village was suddenly under attack. I fought the big monster thing, and then I was teleported to its lair, and then like I hit it a few times, and that was the end of the newbie zone. All in all, it took 5, maybe 10 minutes. And because of this truncated experience, I was left kind of satisfied because I've gone through this newbie zone so many times, but at the same time, left with the impression that I had no idea what was going on. And if I was a new player, again, I would have no idea why this girl was captured, what she was doing in a test tube, and her explosion would have had no impact on me. So it's worth noting that the newbie zone is quite different to what we're used to over in North America, and this is the newbie zone that players henceforth are going to get to experience. Either way, once that was done, I went ahead here and I purchased a VIP membership. When I played the North American version of Tera, I felt like to fully experience the game and to enjoy it, you needed a VIP membership. Not only did it offer bonus XP, bonus gold, but it gave you a village atlas, which allowed you to teleport anywhere around the world you wanted, whenever you wanted. This meant that you didn't need to utilize those teleport crystals. You didn't need to walk around if you didn't want to. They gave you a flying mount so you didn't have to go on the ground. And I know that players aren't necessarily going to be able to afford that $15 a month VIP premium membership, but I feel like, and I know that it's terrible of me to say this, but this game really, while still enjoyable, to me, in my opinion, isn't nearly as worth playing without it, especially for someone like me that has gone through the 1 to 50, 1 to 60 experience multiple times over the course of my MMO career. Now, if you weren't already aware, then Tera is an action MMORPG, a true action MMORPG. You can use all of your abilities without a target, regardless of where you are, unlike some games that provide a hybrid experience here, where some of your abilities are usable, some of them require a target. Tera in specific allows for you to use any ability to literally just shoot in a straight line if you want to. Your abilities are combo. Well, actually, before we go any further, speaking of your abilities, not only do you have to level your skills, your abilities up every 2 or 3 levels, not only do you have to learn them manually, but you also get glyph points, which allow you to upgrade your abilities. As an example here, when you level up, you gain the ability of doing something like increasing the skill's damage by 25%, or going ahead and reducing the skill's cooldown by 10% so you can use it more frequently, maybe even reducing the mana cost of it. This allows for a lot of customization over your abilities and allows for you to play your class a little bit differently to how other players might play it. Something that makes the class more comfortable for you and your specific playstyle. Now, again, the combat is pure action. This is something that I have always thoroughly enjoyed in Tera. There are so many games out there that have really slow tab target combat, really slow action combat, but Tera is definitely up there in my list of best action combat systems in an MMO. And playing the brawler here allowed for me to freely solo a lot of content because I didn't necessarily need a team. Because I mean, the brawler seems to be a massive damage sponge. Now, speaking of not needing a team and being a damage sponge, at level 20, I went ahead and did my very first dungeon. However, prior to doing the dungeon, I was waiting outside and someone noticed me. They went on to state that they came back to Tera, or they started playing Tera due to my Tera videos, which was so cool to see. It is really, really awesome knowing that the videos you do have an impact on not only individual people, but the population within a game itself. So shout out to you. I forget what your name is. I'm just sorry that I forgot what your name is, but I mean, you'll be in the video footage anyway. So shout out to you, random stranger. So I went ahead and I noticed that I had the Vanguard Quest, which is a type of repeatable that you can earn rewards for that has to go out and do things like kill X amount of monsters or kill X amount of BAMs, maybe go out and repeat the dungeon a few times, the dungeons that are specific to your level range. A lot of this takes place in the large open world, with the exception of those dungeons in specific. The world, of course, being a segregated world where there are loading screens that separate each zone, kind of like Blade and Soul, kind of like Guild Wars 2 or Final Fantasy 14. But at level 33 in specific, I did a dungeon called the Sinestro Manor. Now, I have run this dungeon so many times over the years, but this is the first time I ever encountered this issue. Now, the dungeon had me enter solo, which I honestly do not recall having to do before, but I entered the dungeon solo. I made it all the way to the second last boss. It's the kind of the Joker looking dude, and I killed him. I spawned the NPC. She told me that we're going to fight our way through the monsters, and then I needed to accompany her through the monsters to the ladder that leads us down and through the end of the dungeon. So I did. I started fighting some of the monsters, and then out of nowhere, she just ups and vanishes. And I just took a moment, and I'm like, hello? Like, did she just run away? Did she abandon the quest? Is she like did she class change into a ninja or something? Because I have no idea what's going on. So I left the dungeon, I came back, I killed the final boss, like I did everything I could, and in the end, nothing was fixing that quest, and I needed that quest to continue because it was part of the main story. So after Googling around, I learned that I had to type in /reset the entire instance and do everything all over again. So I did, and that was really frustrating, but there are bugs that I encountered in this version of the game that I had never encountered in the North American version. Now, that could be because I was just lucky when I played the North American version, or it could be that I was just unlucky when I played Gameforge's version, or it could potentially be that Gameforge's version, since it runs on a different version than the North American version, is a little bit buggier. I don't know. I can't really say. I'm going to need someone to potentially confirm this for me, but I did Google it, and there were a ton of people that were having this issue. So the fact that this has not been fixed up until this point in time is a little bit disconcerting. Now, one thing I did notice in Gameforge's version of Tera were that there were noticeable ping issues. They weren't really large issues, but they were large enough where I noticed them. Typically, I was able to dodge out of AoEs without any issues whatsoever when I played in North America. However, now in Gameforge's European version, I don't know where their North American servers are hosted, but where I once was capable of dodging out of specific AoEs, now I get hit by them. Case in point, this level 69 dungeon. I attempted to time my jumps. I varied the time in between each jump, and at least 7 out of 10 times I hit the laser beams. It did not matter how good my timing was. I could not make it over those. Yet on my screen, there should have been no way that those laser beams hit me. So ping issues are definitely a thing now. That is something I never had before. I don't know how many of you guys have ping issues in this game, but I'm gonna go ahead here and shout out something that might help you guys with it. I use exit lag, and no, I'm not sponsored to say this. I'm just letting you guys know that I use exit lag to get into games like Lost Ark. I used exit lag to get into the Blue Protocol beta. I used exit lag to get into Moonlight Blade. There is a lot of uses to a VPN, one in specific being the reduction of ping. Now, while I didn't use it at the time because I was already in the dungeon, if I'd known that it was going to require accurate timing like that, I probably would have went ahead and booted exit lag up, because when I'd used it in Blade and Soul in the past, it reduced my ping by about 30%, which may or may not have been the deciding factor in whether I'd successfully made it over these laser beams. Now, if you want to go ahead and get a free trial of exit lag, then I have a link to that in the description. But otherwise, ping, man, I never thought I would see the day where I was suffering latency issues in Tera. Speaking of dungeons though, the leveling experience is tactically done in 2 different ways. You can either do the main story, which will lead you through the open world, which will lead you through the instances one by one, but the solo variant of the instances. This is much slower. It'll probably take you about an hour, maybe a little more per level. However, the alternative is running the dungeons via the Vanguard request, and this will probably net you about 3 level ups per 30, maybe 40 minutes, as long as you're playing within peak hours, because I was recording footage at approximately 10:30, 11:30 at night. This was on a weekend, mind you, but I sat in queue at level 53 through 54 for about 45 to 50 minutes and not a single dungeon popped. I went ahead and I queued for this the next morning at about 11 in the morning, and I got a queue in about 30 seconds. So if you're going to queue, I do urge you to not queue in the evening, or actually, you know, on second thought, I urge you to go ahead and queue in the evening. There is no one queuing in the evening. So if a lot of you guys do, then there might be more queues for players to enter to actually level during the evening. Now, unfortunately, I did go about leveling through the dungeons for probably about 65% of the leveling experience, because while I do enjoy the story, I have gone through it multiple times now, and I say I enjoy the story, but there isn't really that much of a story in Tera. I know that there is one, but I've never really paid all that much attention to it because it just kind of seems a little bit disconnected and very generic. I mean, there are games out there with amazing stories. I'm sure that there are plenty of people that still enjoy Tera's story, but unfortunately, I'm just not one of them. Now, I leveled all the way to level 65, and at that point, I stopped and I thought to myself, the level 65 through 68 grind is a very arduous journey. This will probably take me days of constant grinding to accomplish, and then I asked myself, do I want to actually do that, or do I want to have fun recording the footage and then be capable of actually making it to level 70, which is max level, for the very first time ever before quitting? So I went ahead here, I booted up my level 67 or 68 gunner, which again has been my main every point I had come back to this game, and I decided I was going to finish leveling that to 70, and I did. I made it to level 70. I was ecstatic that I finally made it to max level in Tera. This is the very first time that I have made it to the max level. Well, actually, I think, granted, I made it to 65 when 65 was a max level, but that was not nearly as large of an accomplishment for me as hitting level 70 is. Now, hitting level 70 definitely took some time. I had the option of continuing with the main story or running the dungeons. I attempted to run the dungeons. I really did not get much XP from running them, so I opted to go ahead and continue with the main story. I got new gear, interestingly enough, on my gunner for starting, I don't know, maybe it was part of an event, maybe it was just new gear that you have access to now that they just throw at you, but it made leveling through the story, killing the monsters out in the open world, substantially easier. Like, I initially got into an encounter with 4 or 5 monsters. This is when I had my old gear on. I want you guys to take a moment here and look at how long these encounters took, how hard they were to actually successfully win. There were instances where I had to run away from the enemies because I was just too weak. I didn't deal nearly enough damage, and I just took an exorbitant amount of it. Now, after equipping this new gear, which was a substantial improvement, I could do all of this and more. I felt like I was a completely different class. I felt like I was so powerful when I felt so weak before. This made it so much easier to hit level 70, and I hit level 70, and I thought to myself, okay, that's really cool. Now I can start doing the end game activities. And then I booted up the instance finder, the matchmaker, and I realized I only had an item level of about 440, and I needed an item level so much higher, like substantially higher than I had. And there was no way that I was going to be able to be capable of grinding my item level up that high over the course of the few days I wanted to play this for. So I thought to myself, you know what? I could invest into attempting to up my item level by a few levels, or I could just call it there for now and discuss my thoughts, my opinions on the course of level 1 all the way to max level, because that is the experience that a lot of players are going to have. And not many people actually hit level 70 when they go ahead and they cover Tera, there are plenty of MMO YouTubers out there that just do small broken highlights, small broken gameplay videos where they go from 1 to 30, 1 to 40. They spend maybe 4 or 5 hours in the game. I spent a week getting from 1 to 70 just so I could show you guys what it's like from 1 to 70, just so I could show you guys what the experience is like, what you have to look forward to or what you don't have to look forward to. Overall, Tera is still a lot of fun. There are some issues that I encountered in Gameforge's version that I never encountered in Nmass's version, but again, that could be purely related to the fact that I was just lucky before and unlucky now. The combat is as good as it has ever been. The graphics, while they are definitely beginning to show their age, still look pretty good. I'm going to assume here that players are still of the impression that Tera is pay to win. I cannot comment on that myself, as I didn't really look into Cash Shop all that extensively. I probably could have, but to me, a lot of the items in there just kind of look Latin, and I don't read Latin, and therefore, you know, I'm looking at the items and I'm like, I don't know if this is powerful or not. I don't play Tera enough to know whether it is going to impact the game or your experience within the game. Now, do I think this game is worth playing in 2021? I think that if you're looking for a game that has a fun action combat system, that has a large expansive world, that still has a semblance of a population, that looks pretty good and plays pretty good, then yeah, Tera is definitely a game that you can go into and invest some time into. I would actually urge you to, especially if you've never tried this game before. Hitting level 70 will definitely take a little while, especially if you do not have a VIP membership, but it is still worth it purely for the journey alone. And, you know, of course, it is always going to hold a special place in my heart because it brought Mrs Stix and I together. Anyway, guys, that is everything I wanted to talk to with regards to Tera today. Let me know down in the comment section below if you still play Tera, if you're going to play Tera, and let's talk about it. Anyway, guys, that is it from me. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace. Someday soon, I'm gonna make it.